Today on Switch to Linux, we want to talk about a big data breach and why this is important for us to think about, even though it's not an American company. But it does beg a question, what are we doing in our world and how much pushback do we really need to do? Thanks for checking out this video by Switch to Linux, and I always encourage people to maintain the best privacy you can, whether that's using a privacy-focused phone or a Linux operating system that doesn't make any external connections it doesn't have to, and just other types of things like that. And one of those big features right now is cars. In American economy right now, cars are attaching so much data. Now, it is possible to go in and remove the SIMs that they put in the cars, and many of them anyway. Looking for those ways is important. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit near the end. But ultimately, the fact is that most cars today, whether they're electric cars or gasoline cars or whatever they are, most cars today are collecting way more information than is feasibly possible or feasibly necessary for the simple ability of getting you to go from point A to point B. And the over-computerization and all of the DRM nonsense and vendor locking things in means that cars are becoming even more difficult to repair, which is frightening because if you have a simple car with a simple engine and something goes bad, a competent mechanic can swap out the parts and figure out the problem. Well, hopefully figure out the problem first and then swap out the right part. But car companies in America are going overboard in data collection. And we're not just talking your Teslas and your EVs. We are talking everything. Mozilla, when it did its report looking at the automotive industry, said it was the most privacy violating industry they had ever researched. They have researched data brokers. That's a frightening thought. And so today I want to talk briefly about this breach that occurred in Tata Motors, which is an Indian company, Asian Indian company, not the native lands here in America, but the Tata Motors breach exposes 70 terabytes of sensitive data before it was fixed. And so security researchers discovered that 2 sets of Amazon service keys were left exposed. One of these was hard-coded into a crappily designed website. Hard-coded into a website on the source code. Right-click, view source code. There are your AWS security credentials. That allowed you in. The other one was slightly encrypted, but it was just encrypted with a JavaScript encryption, very easy to decrypt. These 2 keys allowed anybody access to their entire S3 calendar. That is what I call the Amazon S3 buckets, because things leak out of those things all the time. And so the Indian automotive giant was recently found to expose tens of terabytes of sensitive company and customer data due to a critical security lapses, according to a report by security researcher Eaton Xavier. So, and I'm hoping I pronounced that name right, he discovers that 2 sets of keys were left exposed. So the keys, of course, allowed anybody with those keys to view it, to grab the information from the database at Amazon. And what they ended up getting is effectively everything. They got source code for components. They got customer logs. They got customer data. Now, I don't know if this company is collecting the type of sensitive data that our cars collect here in America. I don't know if they do that, but this type of breach would have caused everything about every driver with one of these data harvesting vehicles to be available on the internet. And this is utterly insane. So fortunately, this is not something that impacts the United States. Unfortunately, India is a bigger country, and that is certainly a problem. So he said he reported all 4 vulnerabilities to India's computer emergency response team in August of 2023. This article just came out. I think this article just came out. Yeah, this article just came out. That's a long time ago. All right, where is that? Tata Motors acknowledged the findings and began patching the issue, though remediation took several months. Tata Motors reportedly said that all the issues were promptly and fully addressed and that the infrastructure is regularly audited by leading security firms, according to the company's communication head. So if their infrastructure is regularly audited by leading security firms, I think those security firms aren't leading and they probably need fired. Or they're the same Indian scammers that are trying to call you every other week on your phone. I'm not sure which one, but clearly they are not actually doing a job. The company is yet to confirm whether the affected users have been notified. So, yes, millions of credentials leaked out, and no, I'm not sure anybody knows yet. Disclosure exemplifies how exposed credentials and weak access controls can put even major global enterprises at risk. Let me see if I can find what information was taken there. It was pretty much everything. So exposing backups, invoices, customer databases containing permanent account numbers, and sensitive government-issued identifiers. A second case involving Fleet Edge, which is their fleet tracking solution, which in another pair of keys was encrypted client side but could be easily decrypted. So the Fleet Edge is a tracking solution probably for a certain set. But this would be like, the Ford Motors GPS data on your phone that for some reason Ford decides your car needs to send back to you. And that's the type of level. Now, fortunately, this is not a breach that happened here. Unfortunately, it is a breach that happened. The question is, are we going to learn our lessons? The first major lesson of this is many industries harvesting this amount of data. It is 100% completely and totally unnecessary to harvest it. There is zero reason any Ford owner needs to have Ford keeping abreast on where you are driving, what time you are driving, the specific diagnostics, or in the case of Nissan, according to Mozilla and their privacy policy, who you might be enjoying your back seat with. Yes, that is actually in, I think it's Nissan's privacy policy, that they will even collect information about your, quote, sexual activities, end quote. Okay, very fascinating. There is zero reason. Once Nissan sells me a car, Nissan does not need any other information. Okay, if I happen to have a problem with my Nissan car, I can go to Nissan and hand them my car and say, what's going on? You say, well, we need this for recalls. No, we don't. The last several cars I've owned have all had recalls. They use the DMV to notify everybody who has registered a car that there is a recall. So that's not the reason. What's the reason? Well, the reason is they want to collect that data because that data is valuable. And after you have spent an ungodly amount of money on a crappy built vehicle, then they can continue to monetize you ad infinitum by selling your data to advertisers and data brokers who then in turn make more money on you. And this should be criminal. We have all these laws. We got to protect the children. Who's going to protect me? I can say I don't want you collecting information on my 5-year-old, but I can't say I don't want you collecting information on me. How does that make any sense? The 5-year-old doesn't have money to spend. I do. I choose not to see your advertising. There's a thought. Now, I have organized my life that I don't see advertising in a general scope of the sense. I was actually at a pizza shop today, and they had some streaming service going on, and there was an ad on there. I'm like, so that's an advertisement. Interesting. Good thing I don't see those on a regular basis. But what is the fundamental problem with this? We talk about big companies. We are a big company. We have military grade encryption. How many times you've heard that nonsense? Yeah, giant companies like AWS that killed half the internet the other day with a DNS failure. And I think Azure had another one, but not many companies use that. So some Microsoft servers went down, but I'm not sure other people noticed. Xbox users. And there were a few other ones there as well. But the DNS servers going down, big companies fail big sometimes. And frankly, the bigger a company is, the bigger a failure happens. happens. If AWS did not manage a large portion of the internet and we had that big outage like we had at AWS, people probably wouldn't notice it and it probably wouldn't make a front page news. But when your bed stops working and your signal messages stop working because of an AWS outage, it causes lots and lots of people around the world to go, what is going on? Big companies also fail. Big companies fail for the same stupid reasons little companies fail for, but when they fail bad. 70 terabytes of data, including customer data. If that were to happen here and Ford has a data breach, and it probably will because Ford outsources their stuff to somebody else, and even the biggest security companies have data lapses. The big companies fail, and the big companies fail bad. Small companies, they can't manage the security as much. We see this. This is why I don't like using these single developer projects, whether they're the web browsers we talked about or the distros we talked about. The single developers have a single point of failure. There's not a team to pick it up when there's something weird that goes on. And so, sometimes you're just not aware of a security breach for several days. I'm trying to think. I think we had something like that not too long ago where a client is, I'm not actively managing their stuff. I'm kind of passively managing their stuff. And their store was down for like 2 weeks because they weren't checking things as was required by what we were doing. It's not my job to go in and check it every day because they don't pay me for that. They pay me to do the stuff and they're supposed to keep abreast on that. And so things went down for a while. And only when they alerted me was I able to get in there and remediate the issue. And we got it remediated really quickly. I figured it out pretty quick. But the problem is that small companies can't manage security, whether they don't have the funds or they just think that you can just outsource to an Amazon S3 calendar and everything is perfectly fine and secure, especially if they use third-party, cheap labor to build their websites and they don't, they're, wow, this thing works. And they have no earthly idea that the AWS credentials are hard-coded into the source code of the website. Well, that's a failure right there. Tata, of course, they are a big enough company. They should not be doing that. But the reality is, since they are such a big company and the corporate mantra of any big company is to shave every cost at every possible trend, they are likely more insecure than a small company in some ways because of that. So that's certainly a challenge. So why are they collecting the data? Well, they collect the data for the analytics. The problem is most companies do not read the analytics and or they cannot understand the analytics. The analytics that these things collect is so far beyond the scope of any typical CEO or whatever else. They can say, oh, see the analytics, oh wow, look at all these hits, all these, but it takes a lot. Like, we had a client bought into one of these new fly-by-night AI marketers. We're going to get you on Fox. We're going to get you on CNN. Whether AI was really getting us as mentions on AI slop, like AI slop that was the worst quality slop. Like these things were so bad, I went back into the WordPress archive and I found the WordPress test page and several lorem ipsum test posts on the thing that they were putting our product on. I'm like, you need to stop these people because they're causing more reputational harm with this crap. Okay. But I was able to tell him that because he's like, what do you think? Is it worth it? I was able to go into the analytics because I can read the report and I drilled down into it. And I said, we have 0 hits from any of the 50 AI slop crap that they've attached us to this month. 0. I said, fire them. It's not worth the cost. But not everybody can read that analytics data or they just don't bother with it. But the reality is that analytics data is sold. Now, the analytics data is sold, and it's not that people are sitting there and poring over it. It's that the analytics data is sold and it's dumped into this giant data broker database. And then that is tapped to find all of the core demographics to push a targeted ad to you for whatever you're doing. If you always drive down this bend, wouldn't it be nice to drive down that bend with a smoking hot Dunkin' Donuts coffee? After all, America runs on Dunkin', right? You get all this kind of crap. And the reality we see with all this is that all of these companies are harvesting it, not because they need it to make their product better. We need this to make our product better. We need this to make sure your car's working. No, we need this to make more money off of you because the overpriced $50,000 for the piece of garbage that's going to break down in 3 months wasn't enough profit for us. We need more money, which is why first we push you into the financial arm so we can make money on the interest, and now we're collecting all your data to send it to a data broker to monetize that data. And as long as we keep that pipeline going, we get them sweet advertising dollars. That's what it's used for. It's all machine learning. It's all machine captured. Now, does that mean it's not bad? It's all machine. Nobody's really looking at it. The reality is I don't really care if a human being is looking at it or not. I care if it's there for a rogue machine to go, hey, look, this guy believes in the Bible. Target him for something bad, because that is kind of the end point where we're getting to in our world. We will be targeted for key demographics. This is why the database IBM helped Germany build. It was started under a very good, very clean, very noble cause. We're going to archive everything. What's your religious affiliation? What's your national affiliation? Do you have this? Do you have that? What's all this? This is an awesome database. We can use this to basically help do everything. And then a guy named Adolf Hitler got it and said, hey, this database tells us who the Jews are. That's the problem. The problem is you don't know who's coming after you, and if that data is there, it can be exploited, and that's why we need to do this. So it's fed into these data brokers, it's fed into the marketing companies, and it will eventually be fed into the governments who want to target you with things like, the Chinese social credit score, which we effectively sort of have in a quiet way. Now, let me warn you this, of course. This is dealing with cars, and cars collect a lot of data. So the first thing you can do is it is still possible to get cars. Like my van, because it's commercial, has like no data that goes back unless the owner's manual is lying. And I don't really have reason to, because those are generally optional packages in the commercial vehicles. Usually the commercial fleets, they'll add that separate GPS layer, and that's what they do, but it's easy to pull off. Yeah, my van had one of those when I got it. I pulled that bad boy off of them. Okay, so the second factor was that when they're collecting all this stuff, you can find a car, and you should look for a car explicitly that does not have this type of tracking. So whether that's an older car, or hunt for a car that doesn't have it, or in some instances, it is possible to remove that telemetry from that vehicle. I actually have a friend who did it. Found that stuff in the truck and went in there and pulled out the SIM modules and all the other stuff that communicated data back, pulled it all out, figured it all out, and boom, done. That vehicle's not tracking you. Now, that should not be what we have to do. To Louis Rossman's point, we should not live in a world where I have to go into my vehicle and start ripping parts out to stop the company from harvesting data they should not be harvesting. We need to pass laws to protect the driving data and everything else. I will give you one more warning, though. The biggest source of marketing data right now is actually your cell phones. This is why your smartphone is the worst betraying piece of crap you have. You need to take a lot of extra steps to security lock that phone down. And I got news for you. If you're using stock Android or stock Apple and you are downloading apps from the App Store, you're in the system. There's nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do is get out of that system. Switch to open source applications, switch to custom mods, switch to DNS profiles that block all possible ad trackers. I'm using NextDNS on my Graphene OS phone, which works beautifully. I can go in there and I can manually tweak it, and I can see what data is being collected, where it's going. Effectively, I run a very, very robust data tracking and marketing tracking system that prevents all this data from being collected from my device as it is. On top of that, I'm using Graphene OS, and on top of that, I'm using only open source applications that have been vetted and verified. And so effectively, I have made myself pretty invisible. The other thing, of course, you need to do is you need to not be logged into any accounts that you do not have a reason to be logged into. If you're using Google, do not be logged into Google. It's better to switch off of it, but if you're using it, it's better to not be logged in than to be logged in. If you are using, I'm just trying to think, if you happen to use Facebook, you should have a separate browser for Facebook so that your Facebook browser, whatever you're using for Facebook, cannot access any other browsing data you're doing on your main browsing situation. That way Facebook's not harvesting data. Now on phones, this doesn't work because Facebook was kind of caught accessing server layers. I'm not sure. I don't think they do that on computers too, but I know on phones, they would basically turn on like a co-turn server, allowing them to basically create an opening listening port in the Facebook app, allowing them to siphon data even through the alleged sandboxes. On mobile, Facebook is dangerous. You should not use Facebook on a mobile device. If you're going to use it on a computer, use it on a dedicated browser, and do not stay logged in to prevent Facebook from tracking you around the country. You can go the extra step. I don't use Facebook. I have it completely blocked on the firewall on my system. I have that and Facebook, Google Analytics, and a bunch of other these data trackers. But I have one browser which I set to use DNS over HTTPS, allowing it to bust out of my firewall. So when I need to get on these sites for clients, I can still access them on one browser, but everything else I do on the computer is invisible to that tracking system. And those are the types of things you need to think about when you are considering being private. You do not want to get your car data caught up. You don't want your smartphone data caught up. We have to focus on these security protocols and privacy protocols. And it all starts with thinking about the dangers of a car company leaking 70 terabytes of customer data into the world by hard coding AWS credentials into the source code of a website, which is amateurish for such a large company. Let me know your thoughts about all that. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below.